So this question relates to a study that Catalyst, which is a leading women's organization, put out that found that companies with the highest representation of women on their top management teams experience better financial performance than companies with the lowest women's representative within their companies. And the findings were true that return on equity and total return to shareholders were 35% and 34% higher, respectively. And then, according to a Dow Jones study, successful companies backed through venture capital have, on average, 2 times more women in their highest ranks, and that these companies have a greater chance of going public, turning a profit, or being sold for more money than they, could ever have raised. So these results have also been relative to companies that have a lot of minorities in their employee base. And so I'm going to ask a question is, why do you think companies aren't seizing on this data where having more women in their companies and having more minorities are making those companies more successful, why we don't see more women in leadership roles? And then what do you think can be done so that we see more positive change and actually potentially see more Asian women in leadership roles? And maybe I could start maybe with Leona, that question.
For me, I think some of it is awareness, right? So, some of the statistics that you said, they were shocking to me. Within my own organization, we had some similar statistics in terms of the last 5 years. And when those were presented to the executive council, many actually didn't even know. It's not something that they think about on a day-to-day basis. For them, if you walk in, when I walk into a room or an audit committee and I'm the only minority there, that for me is very compelling. But when they're coming into the room, they don't see it in our shoes. I think that's part of the reason. And what we can do better is really, for me, an education and further education. I thought about this, slavery didn't end because the slaves said slavery is bad, right? It required others within power knowing that, and understanding, and then accepting that there needs to be change. So for us to get the needle moved, it's further education of folks and then further getting the word out and working with those that, quote unquote, are in power to bring that change. Right? And I think these types of events are helpful, definitely, to get the word out, but I think we need to bring it to a broader audience as well.
I think people are generally emotional beings more than they are totally rational beings, and if everybody just followed the money and only thought about bottom line, it would probably act in a different way, but ultimately you do what's comfortable for you, and you hang around with people that are more like-minded. And, if these institutions have been run by white men for a long time, it's going to take a lot to change that overnight, because there's just a point where it's hard to figure out who's the right person. And so people go, and I wrote an editorial recently in the LA Times about this. These studios are very much run like all these other companies I think that we're talking about. They really have been dominated by leaders who are white men. There have been some high-profile women leaders. One just lost her job, as you've probably heard. But it is really just, and then why white male directors are constantly being hired and white male screenwriters, and it's a club. It's a club, and you can't do anything on your own. You have to, it's very, very collaborative work, so you have to always work with a lot of people, and who are you going to gravitate? If I could, I'd only work with Asian women. How great that would be. But, we know better because you want a mix of opinions. I mean, I feel like it would be very comfortable. A lot of my assistants always over the years have been Asian women, and it's just comfortable. There is a level where you can communicate more easily, but we all have to step outside of our comfort zone, I think, and really try to see things from many different perspectives. And lately in my working a lot with China and between Hollywood and China, I'm even made more aware of different points of view and different ways of, business styles and cultural differences. It's really challenging on many levels. So I'm sympathetic to a little bit of a degree, but clearly things need to change.
I agree with Janet. There's something which we don't realize is that we all are driven by our experiences. And unconscious bias is real. I suppose most of you have seen the Harvard Business School study that happened. Nitin Noria, who's the new dean of the business school, when he got in, asked a very simple question. It's about 30% women when we get in, and about 5% women who graduate at the top of the class. That didn't seem right statistically, mathematically. And so those of you who realize he just put some practices in place to actually measure women's performances and whether the professors are hearing it. And just by taking data, the outcomes were dramatically different. Just by better data. So what has Google done? First and foremost, we acknowledged it. Last year in May, we published a diversity report acknowledging that there is a problem. That's step one. Number two, we put a diversity OKR, saying we have a target. That means everybody starts thinking about it. But more importantly, we have now established unconscious bias training for people. And it's amazing how many people don't even realize we're doing it. We just hear different. We project different things. And so for all of us in this room, what can we do? I give a great example. One of the smartest people I work with on our team is this guy called Paul. And I just met his girlfriend, Jen, who also works for Google. And the best thing that Jen did for Paul and his career, who I think Paul has got a humongous trajectory, I think he's going to do fantastically well, is that she insisted he goes to unconscious bias training. I think he'll be a better manager because of it.